Okay, we're all good to go. Okay, good evening to y'all. We begin with a vow and the four great vows. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless fixations. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. Okay, we continue on with Daoxin, and I'm talking about Daoxin, but I'm also talking about Chan as it was developing during this time period historically. So Daoxin is kind of a player in here, as is Hongren and Huining and Shen Shu. Shen Hui comes in, and there's other people on the periphery, Faru. I see the name Faru. I don't know if it's the same name in Chinese. Does anybody know how to pronounce that name in Chinese? Faru, F-A-R-U. Nobody know it? He was kind of a pivotal player, but he didn't get much credit.
Sounds like Faru. Fa is the Dharma. Ru is such. Like
Okay.
The suchness.
Okay, so anyway, he is in the picture as well. We've been talking about the East Mountain teachings and where they were going in terms of the practice, and there was quite a bit of scholarly debate as to the northern and southern schools, and then I kind of interjected kind of the middle point, which is the East Mountain teachings, which is actually where people were congregating. And at this point, it could be very much similar to a Nalanda University where people were coming together and bringing their thoughts and practices. And now, as I'd mentioned before, although the emphasis was still on the Lankavatara and the Mahaprajnaparamita Sutra, a lot of other sutras are coming in, and the monastics and scholars were beginning to put them side by side and finding out what probably most importantly the common ground was in this. The emphasis at this point again was more towards the practice and utilizing it in terms of meditation. I don't think that there was a difference between the southern school and the northern school of this gradual method. And I think ultimately there was a debate in Tibet with Mohayan as one of the persons representing Chan. And there's a big question as to whether this great debate actually occurred or not, or it was just something where they were kind of rejecting this kind of a sudden realizations or sudden enlightenment versus a gradual approach. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But a lot of this is a misunderstanding of what was happening at that point in time. It wasn't this against this. And I don't think that if you read the Platform Sutra, you would see it as just something that's sudden versus gradual, even though there was the politicking in there to advance Huining as the sixth patriarch over Shen Shu. But even Faru was in the mix there as a patriarch, and so it's not so much as important as what was happening, how they were examining mind. And here, the main emphasis was on, as I'd mentioned before, what we could call wall gazing. And I like that term wall gazing because it stands up to the test of time. It came in with Bodhidharma, but this wall gazing is probably the most precise way of explaining what we're doing when we're meditating and what we're doing in meditating on. The wall essentially represents mind, and that one is looking into mind. And so whatever appears there, one is clear about it. And this is what's important, and we'll go into it in a little bit more detail in a moment. But it is an important aspect of this, but it does not negate the practice of other things. For instance, devotional or Chan practice or morality practice. All those are incorporated in, or the study of sutras are incorporated into this practice. Sometimes things get taken out of context, and to the extent that later on they were saying, oh, with Chan is beyond words and phrases, so we don't have to spend any time on words and phrases, but that's really nonsense. And that whoever was advancing that, whether it was then or now, just clearly has not had any kind of a realization whatsoever, to the extent that they're ignorant about that to make those kinds of statements. It's something that everything is of value in terms of the practice, and everything it leads to it. More importantly, our practice is a reflection of the Buddha mind. It is not an aspiration to the Buddha mind, but a reflection of how the mind works. It's why we probe into it. And this wall gazing then takes us beyond a cogitation, a thinking, contemplation of what mind is, into mind itself, which cannot be thought of, cannot be conceptualized, and is beyond the parameters of the samsaric consciousness. It creates the samsaric consciousness and knows the samsaric consciousness, but the samsaric consciousness cannot know mind. And so there's where we kind of like scratch our head and say, well, then how do we get there? But we don't necessarily get there. We're there, and we see things in this way. And probably, to me, in terms of the practice and looking at Tibetan practice and Theravadan practice, and the Chan is so much you're at home, and you feel that way, and you practice from that orientation that you're at home. And it was when I first heard Shifu, Master Sheng, give a lecture, and his lecture was such an open and easy one for a general audience, but yet everything was complete, everything was so simple, everything was just in this moment, and it was understood in this way. If one just simply put aside any kind of cogitation or thinking, I like or dislike, it was just there, so simple, presented in a very simple way, but yet so clear, like hearing the pealing of a bell, so clear, and the ringing of it, and one was aware of that. And this is what was happening here, how Bodhidharma was able to present this in this way. Now, they always say, well, what did Bodhidharma bring to China? And, one of the masters said, if he brought anything to China, he wouldn't have been able to save himself. And the idea is that originally just this mind is there. It's difficult for us to make that quantum leap into mind, but it doesn't matter in what direction one leaps. You're going to land in mind, even if you fail, because you're in mind already. We just don't understand that, and I'll go into that in a little bit more, but I'm kind of giving you an idea of where we're going with this in a contemporary way, and then going back into time and seeing what they were saying about this. At that time, there was three main meditation techniques. One of them was a meditation on emptiness or shunyata, and in which one contemplates all dharmas of the body and mind are empty. All dharmas being all phenomena, anything related to it are fundamentally empty. This is a word we don't understand. So when we say empty, we immediately think it's like empty, like a bag of popcorn, you know, and you're trying to look for that last little kernel at the bottom, but it's empty. But it's not that kind of emptiness. It is an emptiness that transcends an empty bag of popcorn and a full bag of popcorn that's simultaneously present. Where is it present? It's present in mind, but this is the dimension we do not understand. We don't know that. We don't know when the first kernel of popcorn popped in a fire, who knows how many thousands of years ago, or when the last one will pop. We don't, all of these things mind knows, but we don't know. But mind has that ability to do that because it's all connected. And that's the emptiness of things, is that it's this dependent connection with all phenomena that is creating appearances in mind. We see it from the viewpoint of subject and object and create this idea of duality. But imagine if there is no subject or object, no you, no me, and no time. Going backwards, going forwards, or in the present, there's no time. We only set our clocks based on the rotation of the sun around the earth. But is that true cosmic time? I mean, what time is it right now on Jupiter or Mars, or way out into the far out into the galaxy? And they say, well, it's 10 o'clock, and they're going, you're so foolish. What do you mean 10 o'clock? You know, you're not on Earth anymore. Who do you think you are? And so we begin to look at the world from a different viewpoint. This viewpoint is not a viewpoint of a point looking at something else, but a point going out in all directions and coming in all directions. And it is mind itself. The only way we can do that is suspend thinking. This type of thinking that we suspend is the thinking that attaches to thoughts going by, creating a linear or sequential pattern of thought or cogitation. But suspending that, what one trades off for is the gnosis of the mind itself. We do not know that. We do not know the abilities of the gnosis of the mind, but there's sometimes you can feel that. You can feel people suffering. You can feel people suffering from many miles away, or many interest, or whatever it is, or a blade of grass that's growing in a field in Vietnam. And whatever it is that we see things in a different viewpoint, in a different, not spatially, not temporally, but just within mind itself. This is mind work. So we continue on. The next practice is contemplation of an ultimate principle. And this is called one practice samadhi. The last technique was the practice of concentrating mind on one thing until mind becomes fixed in samadhi. Again, you could use that with a Wat To. You could use it in silent illumination, reciting the Buddha's name, observing the breath. All of these things enable one to disengage the thought sequence or the linearity of cogitation, so that one simply is is in the present moment and aware of what is arising, but not chasing thoughts. And in this, there is an instructions on the essential expedients for calming the mind and accessing the path. Excuse me. This comes from the records of the masters of Lankavatara. And so those were some of the early records that was writing down what the patriarchs had were recording and events about their lives. Again, it was with Dao Xin that we began to get more information of the patriarchs rather than these little bits and pieces. And this method of maintaining the one without wavering is important, because when we maintain this contemplation of mind without wavering, then thoughts nevertheless arise, appearances arise in mind, sounds are still there. One is aware of all those things. I'm here, I'm talking to you, I'm aware my dog just went outside and the birds are chirping outside, it's still light here, but that doesn't interfere with what you're doing.
Unknown caller.
I told my friend Scam not to tell me at this time, but anyway, sorry about that. But in any case, it doesn't interfere with what you're doing. In whatever you do, when you do that, then these things will not disturb you. Okay. And the practical explanation of maintaining the one without wavering is that the one is simply to contemplate every aspect of one's mental and physical existence, focusing on the individual component of unswerving attention until it realizes the essential emptiness or non-substantiality. And this is a way of doing it where we look at it, but it still is nevertheless wall gazing. It's looking into something and not paying attention to it, but in that non-paying attention to it, we realize that it's insubstantial. It is just appearances. We don't have to say, the birds are not real. The dog is not real. The phone is not real. You don't have to say those things. Mind is just simply in a state of gazing at mind, but there is no locus or point where one is gazing at mind. Mind is, when we gaze at mind, it's not subject and object. It is just being in mind. And this is the mistake that we make when we sit to meditate, is that we are trying to maintain this subject and object. It's not there. So it's not like you're here and looking at a wall and there. It's whatever is in mind appears there by its self nature. We don't see a front or a back to it. We don't see a viewpoint to it. We just, there is this gnosis that's there. What I've talked about, this primordial gnosis, this gnosis that's been there way before samsaric existence. And it's there. It is not something that is looking at something. It is being. We can't take it any further than being or suchness. It is the end point. As you're traveling up this meditation train from scattered mind to beginning to calm the mind, to leg pain, and to drowsiness and unified mind, and you're taking this train up, at some point, that train turns to the void or is absorbed. And so there's a mental and physical absorption of all appearances, only leaving mind. But it's not something that we can say, I'm in mind. If you say you're in mind, then you're not there. The best you've done is arrived at a unified mind, because there's still something there, some vestiges of mind. One has to go beyond all of that. Those little vestiges, those transparent aspects of mind at the very end of when you're meditating, they will rob you. They will convince you that whatever experience you have is mind. But remember this, mind is not a mental state. It's important for you to understand that as you begin to practice, as soon as you sit to meditate, do not engage in, I need to quiet my mind. Please don't do that. You don't have to. Just gaze. Whatever comes up, if it's, from one of those old movies, 76 trombone band going by, let it go by. It's just in mind. It doesn't matter. Eventually, you'll get to the 76 trombone and it'll move on. You don't have to say anything but just sit and gaze. Things are going to go by. But if you start marching with the band, then you've lost it. But we know that the band or reasonable facsimile is going to arise in mind. Let it go. Just let it go. Just stay there while gazing. There's nothing to do. Just think about it. There's nothing to do. What are you going to do in mind when you're sitting there? If you sit there and cogitate about all the things that are happening, that you got your tax refund, or worse yet, you had to pay taxes, it's all right. I mean, those are the things that happen. And you just let them go. They have nothing to do with this particular moment. And so what we do is we become used to wall gazing. So when we get up off the cushion, we're doing the same thing. We're aware that things are arising in mind. Some of them good, some of them not so good. Some of them smell fragrant, some of them smell foul. But it's okay, because that's just the way it is. And we see samsara as it really is. But we do not have to discriminate or move towards it or move away from it. Where are you going to move? It's mind. So the more you try to push something off, the more later on it will come back, because you've set up the habitual tendencies to attract that, whether it's something good or something bad. You just see it in this way. When you sit, there's no preparatory requirements, no inducement, no moral prerequisites. It's very interesting. There's no moral prerequisites to do that. Have you been a good boy, Gilbert? Yes. Did you brush your teeth? Yes. Did you call anybody by a bad name today? No. Okay, good. Now you're able to sit and meditate. There's no prerequisites. You just sit. In that moment, you just sit. What Gilbert is has nothing to do with it. Of course, if you've done a lot of bad things and you're carrying the weight of it, it's going to be very difficult for you to meditate. But here, we're just looking at pure mind. No preliminary exercises, to do it. Just sit. Just sit on the cushion. You don't have to do anything more than that. Just sit. How hard is it for you to just sit on the cushion? But we make a big thing of it. Oh my God, I hope I don't think about this, or I hope I don't think about that, or I wonder about this, or wonder about that, and you get all enchanted with whatever you expect to see in mind. You just sit, you just come to the cushion, sit, that's it. Your inducement is, as you're approaching the cushion, your mind is already with the method, whether it's illumination or Huato, reciting the Buddha's name, whatever it is, the breath, your mind is already there. That's your inducement, okay? And sometimes I'll do the inducement, to calm people down, especially in retreats and stuff, and bring a light in and do all of that stuff. But Shifu wasn't really big on that kind of stuff. He used to poke fun at Goyen Fashe and say, he was doing all this hocus pocus, like relax, 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 to do that. So almost like a self-hypnosis. There's nothing special here. You just sit. It doesn't matter, whether you had a good day or a bad day. It has nothing to do with you sitting on the cushion. Just do it. That's all. And when I read this, I went, yeah, that's the way one should approach the cushion. Just go and do it. Because that's what I do. I go and do it. I don't measure, I'm not worthy to meditate today because I did this or I did that or whatever. No, I just sit. Or whatever I do, in terms of it, I don't think of that. No, and the same thing when one's studying the Dharma. I don't have my mind elsewhere. My only transgression, I imagine, is just playing music in the background, but it doesn't bother me. It just kind of just shields out, and whatever I study, and no. And it doesn't affect me. It's not like if I was listening to hard rock music, I'm going to start yelling or something. If I was listening to Vivaldi, I'd put you guys to sleep. It isn't in that way. But I mean, whatever you do, you just keep your mind in a very calm way. My thing is just simply because I don't have enough time to do both of them separately, so I combine them. Okay. May not be the best, but it's my way of doing it. And so it says, instead, one moves directly into the practice of contemplation. So you just go right into it, to contemplate. Second, maintaining the one without wavering is in itself completely without steps or gradation. So there's no steps there. Sometimes we worry when we get the first base or second base or whatever. I'll probably go to levels. But anyway, so do you get to this level and this level and this level? Don't worry about that. The more you think about you're at a particular level, you mess it all up. Honestly, don't ever think, oh, I'm at this level. No. If you were at a certain level, I would be giving you out stripes, Some of you would have sergeant stripes, some of you have corporal, some of you would be busted down and in the Hooskow, Others I could give you like colonel or general epaulets and stuff. It's not that way. You all have the ability to do this. And you all have this ability in the sincerity of how you practice to be able to sit in the right way. Okay. One concentrates, understands, and is enlightened, all in one undifferentiated practice. It's undifferentiated. We don't have levels. We don't have that we got this, that you're getting the little trophies as you go along. If that was the way it would be, that at the end of a retreat, I'd give out trophies to everybody. And even if you got a participation trophy, you'd get something you could show your wife or your husband when you get home. What'd you get? I got a participation trophy. No, I didn't leave the retreat. So no, it isn't in this way. And there's no telling from one moment to the next what's happening. This is the suddenness of it. The suddenness comes from the lack of expectation when you practice. when you don't have the expectation that you're going to get anything or put anything down or do really, really good, then everything just smooths out on its own. It's the self nature of mind. It's when we're grasping and trying to get there, especially when Shifu was around and everybody wanted him to, convey that that you were the chosen one. And then you just struggle so hard, and you be there. All right, maybe he'll notice I've sat through 4 periods, and in extreme pain or whatever. Or that if I go for one more period, maybe I might get some experience. Please don't do that. You can try and overcome the things, but do that without any kind of an expectation that you're going to pick up anything or put anything down. This is very, very important. Okay. So there's interesting because there's this allowance for the sudden apperception of the Buddha mind and gradual improvement in brightness and purity of a concentrated mind. It is not distinguishing and saying, that one is better than the other, or there's a suddenness. The suddenness of things does not mean that one has reached the final point. It is just that one has passed through the door, that maybe got a peak of the self nature of mind, and that's something that that takes time to do, but in a snap of the fingers, there could be a sudden advancement, kind of like the seismic plates, on the West Coast, and they just move very quickly, and there's a jolt, and there's a different orientation in mind. If one holds on to it, we mess it up. But if we don't, it gives us a better idea of how to move forward with everything. Okay. Move on to another one now. We still have time to complete some other things. Last week, we talked a little bit about this article, the one from this scholar, Carmen Miner. And one of the things I went over last week, I believe, was the ratification of the true principle, which it was saying, having reversed the mind's 6 faculties so they do not engage in deluded objects, one gazes into one's own mind and realizes it has no reality. This is a very key point in terms of this, that all of this is looking towards it and saying that all of these appearances, we cannot separate them out and say that this is real. Now, on the other hand, we cannot say that they're not real. But the idea of real and not real is not in the province of samsara. And that's why Nagarjuna was refused to answer in terms of apparent reality and absolute reality, which one is real, because it's beyond the samsara comprehension or conceptualization. But one begins to see these things in terms of the reality of the self nature of mind. There is an immutability in mind. So this immutability in mind is something that's very, very important. It is means that it doesn't change. So immutability means that it doesn't change. It's never changed. So that gives us a clue as to mind versus appearances, because appearances are constantly changing. We have a full bag of popcorn, we have an empty bag of popcorn. Whatever remains is a desire, but that too is a thing, a concept. So those desires are there, or aversions are there, but that is an appearance within mind. So what our problem is in terms of practicing and sitting in meditation is that we are trying to clean the board, the mind board, when we sit to meditate. We want all the thoughts to go away. Leave us alone. Can you please leave me alone for a few minutes? Is that too much for me to ask of myself, to leave myself alone for a few minutes? What's wrong with this? Well, what's wrong is you're approaching it from the samsara. So it's like a mechanical puppet talking to the puppeteer and wishing that it could be real. And it can't be in this way. And it doesn't realize where the strings are that are being manipulated. But if we just sit, we don't have to make anything go away or have anything come in or any light shine on us, because we certainly would want that. I mean, if somebody took some big giant halogen lamps and put them in the top of the Chan Hall and shined them midway through the retreat, you would all swear that you became enlightened. Either that or an alien came to pick you up. But it isn't in this way. It's very simple and mundane, ordinary. There's nothing special to the experience, because there's no self there to pick up the award, the Academy Award, and thank everybody for that, you know. So don't practice in this way. So we're talking about this treatise that was a treatise between Chan and the Tibetan Doshen practice. And they were talking about the expression of reversing the mind's 6 faculties so as not to engage in deluded thoughts. The phrase to bring about complete nirvana without remainder of the aggregates. And this is kind of a confusing thing, to bring about this nirvana without any kind of a sense that there's something there of the aggregates, forms, sensation, touch. Oh, forgot them now. Oh my God. Form. Come on, somebody help me, please. Go ahead.
Form, Vedana, sensation or feeling. A sanjna, which is perception, and then samskara, the mental formations, and consciousness.
Thank you. My brain just fried for a moment. But that hasn't happened for a while, but maybe because I'm getting a little older, or I'm too long of a day. And then again, it talks about meditation method in this small treatise as gazing at the mind, expressed as reversing the mind's 6 faculties so as to not engage in deluded objects. This same formation appears in the Tibetan Dungam transcript as a translation of the Chinese original, turning the luminosity of the mind towards the mind source. And this is what was later simplified into turning the mind's eye inward. And so the luminosity is the gnosis of the mind to be able to see things. It is not necessarily that we've got this bright light that shines and like a beacon. It is the luminosity of the mind is to see exactly what is there, when it came in, when it's going to leave, why it came up. All of these things are the gnosis of the mind. Of course, the mind will know this. We cannot know it. but mind knows it. Why? Because mind created it. So then it was referring to the Sheng Sutra that holds everything as merely a manifestation of the mind, and that the body and the mind are an actualization of the miraculous mind, which is the true essence of miraculous luminosity. And again, all of this goes back to the one Nikaya from so long ago of the luminous mind. And so they're just simply repeating this and saying this is how it works. But this kind of a luminosity that they're talking about is not something that we can conjure up or conceptualize about. It is self-evident in the nature of mind. And again, we're using words to describe something that is inconceivable. And it continues, if the practitioner is able to return all differentiation to its source, then the practitioner will experience a non-dual suchness, the miraculous mind. The text further mentions the term fa yan in connection with the liberation of the 6 faculties, and asserts that if one faculty is turned to its source, all 6 are liberated. Thus, if the original Chinese phrase, turning the luminosity of the mind towards the mind's source, is a gloss for the method called gazing at mind. This method is meant to be an immediate return to the mind source itself, and might even be seen as a face-to-face recognition of the nature of mind. I've been saying this all the time. I've been saying all you got to do is sit. You have to meditate. When you meditate, you're there, and you are in mind, and it's yours to lose. In that moment, when you first start meditating, you are in mind. It's yours to lose. And so that is something that is very, very important, okay, in terms of that. I didn't use the word apocryphal because I think the author is wrong with that term. I saw you use that sentence in the reference, because that means like made up. And so there's a big issue as to whether the Sheng Sutra was made up or not. But if it was made up, it was made up pretty good. And I'd rather not go to that point. That's why I didn't give it any purchase in doing that. So you'll pick that up as you go along. So I'll separate you out from the scholarly side. Okay. And then it talks about the essence of various canonical scriptures, and it says in the Vajra Samadhi Sutra, it is said, empty mind, being non-agitated, encompasses the 6 paramitas. This is very important. I'm going to repeat this because this is something I've been telling you all along. And when I read this, right away, I got it. And that was that the empty mind being non-agitated. Non-agitation means that it's not wanting to put something down, pick something up. It is not disturbed in one bit. It encompasses the 6 paramitas. That's what I was telling you before. The 6 paramitas, you should not see them as something that you aspire to and go up to. You have to see them as the base of mind. And that's important because that's turning the mind's eye inward. It's a big difference. A big difference in terms of how you practice, rather than reaching for something and to trying to perfect samsara and perfect this this sentient being in the hopes that the sentient being will be like Pinocchio and turn into a human, or a human turning into the Buddha. It is already the reflection of the Buddha mind. The more we reflect the Buddha mind, the more the paramitas are clear. They're self-evident because they are the self-nature of mind. And that's why there's an emphasis to practice them. But the shortcut is seeing that they're the base of mind, and we simply are in accord with them. This is a big difference. This is practicing from a different viewpoint. And it's critical in terms of how we look at this. Okay. Again, I'm going really deep with this, and some of you may have difficulties, but it's okay. Later on, you will pick this up. But I'd rather go deep right now, and there's some of you that can handle it. Some of you, eventually you will. It's just like me when I read some stuff. Sometimes I don't know what I'm reading, and then later on I read it again. I go, wow, that's what that meant. So now I'm going back to things that I read 20 years ago, and all of a sudden I see it from a whole different viewpoint, because I wasn't capable at the time 20 years ago to be able to understand it. But now it comes in. But when I read something like this, where it's talking about the paramitas, it gives me a great Dharma joy to know that as I was presenting to you that there is actually scripture to support what I was saying to you. So it says, this statement points out the gate of the sudden teachings of Mahayana Buddhism. And that's kind of probably where my leanings are, is towards this sudden enlightenment. But it's not like sudden enlightenment and now you become a Buddha. It's just sudden enlightenment, and one can begin to see the self-nature of mind, but we still practice. And it says, endless sutras and exegetical scriptures of Hinayana and Mahayana teachings have been composed in order to explain that all sentient beings are primordially self-existing Buddha nature. So it's saying everything is pointing to all sentient beings as being part of Buddha nature. It's inseparable. It's there, and it's primordial, meaning that it's been there from the beginning. However, they merely point out the sentient beings, the path of seeing the original nature and becoming a Buddha. The Dharma is also called return, or this Dharma is also called return to the source, return to luminosity, Fang Zhao, or return to the source, Fan Yang. Somebody who speaks Chinese, you can interpret that in the proper pronunciation if you understood what I said. Anybody? Robert?
Can you say that again?
Return to the source. Fan Yang.
Yeah.
Yen?
Source is yuan, I think.
Okay. So Fan Yen. So so that's one. The other one is return to luminosity. One is Fan Yan, and then return to luminosity is Fan Zhao.
Chow.
That's what I said.
With a
What'd
J
you say?
sound.
Fan
Fang
Jiao.
Jiao.
Fan Jiao. Well, they didn't put a J there, so that's good. Thank you very much. That way, so you understand, Fan Jiao is this return to the luminosity. Not bad, right? You're returning to the source. If we look again, and that's what they're talking about when they say turn the mind's eye inward. Okay. And then it was pointing out that the Tibetan rendering of versa, the mind's 6 faculties so as not to engage in deluded objects, clearly does not have the same implications of the Chinese term Fang Jiao Xinyan in the Huashan Mahayana teachings, Washan Mahayana is directly pointing to the nature of the mind, whereas the Tibetan text, the small treatise, is an antidote to counteract the strain of any sensory objects of the mind. This is more towards the Shen Shu application of gradual enlightenment. And the Tibetans were very, I would say, they misunderstood the aspect of the Southern School or even East Mountain teachings of sudden illumination. It is, and when you talk to even when Shifu talked to the Dalai Lama, when they had a meeting of the minds, you know, the Dalai Lama was erroneous in his understanding of that, in which Shifu corrected him. But the thing is that this idea of suddenness doesn't mean that it's a complete enlightenment. And it is just simply that in this practice and in this wall gazing or contemplating mind, there is the ability that suddenly all sensations, all discriminations, all aversions, desires drop off. And what is left is simply that mind is there. When I say that they drop off in terms of influencing the next moment, of perfuming the next moment. And so as they disengage in this way, you could say from the eighth consciousness is no longer dropping bija seeds, B-I-J-A, these seeds of habitual tendencies, that those come down, they're raining down, but they'd have no impact on the mind at that point. They're naturally there, just like if it's raining and you try to say, oh, well, stop raining, you know, I don't want to be wet, but naturally the weather will go in this way because it goes in these kinds of cycles. And so when one sees that, I should say, this is where one and getting into it, when the mind is aware of that, then it no longer has an impact on the mind. The mind does not move towards these appearances. And as a result of that, the mind is just simply stabilized, silent, because it is simply absorbing all of those seeds, or you could say raindrops, just absorbing them in. And there's nothing that that is there. It's kind of like the sensation once I was in Hong Kong on a very humid day and it started raining. And I could feel the water drops on me. I don't know if anybody's ever had that sensation in a humid country. I could feel the water drops, but my clothes were not getting wet. They're already at the saturation point anyway. And it was just simply, you were absorbing the water, or the water was not acting like rain anymore, where it would hit you and then roll off. It would just be absorbed or evaporated immediately. And that's the same way as when one's mind is calm, all of the information that's arising is just absorbed. There's nothing there, no continuation of whatever that water drop was. It's just absorbed in. And this is kind of the experience of the mind when it's settled and still. It's not in the same way or the impact as if one is dealing with it from the idea of duality or samsara. When we deal with it in this way, in the idea of duality and samsara, it doesn't work right. Then we start chasing after the drops and saying, I like this drop, I don't like this drop. This drop landed on me to cool me off, but I don't like it landed on my purse and it's going to stain my purse or my shoes or whatever, or my hair. Or no. But when the mind is just settled, all of these things are absorbed. And there is not a continuation of cogitation as much as an experience a direct experience of the moment and an evaluation of the moment, not in a linear way of saying, if this happened, this. It knows what to say next, what to do next, what to think next. Not bad, right? But it's difficult for us to understand this. But all of these ancient texts are telling you this, how to meditate, how to practice. That's why I'm staying in this level, because you're looking at it right from the very beginning, where this egg has now beginning, like the embryo of all of this wonderful Dharma. It's been there for so long, its gestation period has been going on. And in fact, it is an echo of what was happening in India. In India, that egg had already been born, but those sutras maybe had not quite yet got there until we get to the Tathagata Garbha Sutras, where now it's like fully delivered. But here we're just getting the beginning of the Lankavatara, the Prajnaparamita Sutra, and then this infusion of hundreds of Buddhist sutras coming into this incredible time period. And there is essentially such an incredible, vibrant practice that's there. Okay, let me see what we have time. One last part, and it's talking about in the seven teachings, nirvana without remainder is explained as follows, because we were talking about that and saying, what is nirvana without a remainder or without being attached to the sense faculties? And it says, a bodhisattva is in a position to comprehend that everything is empty and every dharma arises from mind. If the mind is not agitated, everything is in a state of suchness. So if the mind is not agitated, everything's in a state of suchness. The bodhisattva is therefore able to give up a conceptualizing and grasping mind. The discriminating mind will not arise if the true characteristics are understood. So this discriminating mind will not come up if we understand how it works. So what is that called? Nobody knows.
Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi.
Which is, what do I always call it?
It's Paticca Samuppada.
So it's right view. Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi is how mind works. So you get credit for it. But it is this right view that I pass on, which is that we have to see Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. So it is this right view of looking at things. When we have this right view of looking at things, then we see things appearing precisely where they should be. And we see it very, very clearly. So that is, again, this is right view didn't start coming up, several hundred years later. It was right there from the very beginning. And it is what made Chan Chan. So it says, this is the wonderful principle of pure nirvana, even though this principle appears to have been realized. However, there is nothing to realize because one realizes nothing. One realizes everything. As one realizes nothing, one is freed from all obstacles of suffering. This is the nirvana without remainder. So essentially, it's like letting go of these things, but not letting go in a way of a duality. It's not like emptying out your pockets and then realizing you're carrying around a bunch of rocks in your pocket. It is just letting go of the idea of a independent self, an ego, a personality, or a life and being. That's something that's difficult for us because of our self-conceit, our self-centeredness and this egocentric idea of us. But if we can do that, it changes the world around us tremendously. And I'm not saying through your viewpoint, I'm saying through mine and the function of mine and what you can do moment to moment to moment, how you change your environment. If you look around at your environment, what does it reflect? Okay. Does it reflect an orderliness? Does it reflect the calmness, a loving environment? Or does it reflect chaos, worry, whatever other kinds of things that could come up, desires? No, we have to see in this way, and we see very, very clearly. Doesn't mean that you have to give up all your possessions and wear a robe. No. A lot of you have already passed that train in terms of your age, but it doesn't mean that you can't practice. That was why Vilamakruti was so important, because he was an elderly layperson. And so we can practice. It's important for us to understand that we have that ability. Everyone can have that ability. And that's why those sutras, the later sutras, were such a blessing, because it showed that women had an equal right, equal say, and an equal ability to become enlightened, and lay people as well. And so these are the things that really turn it into this compassion, that it wasn't just, okay, the Buddha came down to teach monastics, and only if you're a monastic could you become enlightened. It wasn't in that way. This was all accepting of all sentient beings. We don't say we've got to deliver innumerable monastic sentient beings. We're talking about everyone. It's all inclusive, but we have to understand the basis for that it is because it is of the true nature. So I will leave it right there for tonight. I think I gave you a whole bunch of stuff to kind of chew on. And again, this is part of it's historical, part of it is doctrinal, and part of it is practice. And you have to put all those pieces together to do that. But when you meditate, you really want to make your best effort to try to meditate in the proper way. You just simply sit, wall gaze. Don't think of anything. If the things come up, you don't push them out. You don't have to see a blank wall. All you have to do is see through the images, understanding that those images are naturally appearing there. Let them go. Just practice letting go, letting go, letting go. And without the idea of letting go. So when we say let go, it just means allow them to appear and disappear naturally in accordance with causes and conditions. But we do not have to pick them out and say, you disappear, you disappear, you disappear. We just see mind as this. Imagine, just imagine. You're looking into mind. Every time you sit, you're looking into mind. When you look into mind, what do you see? Everything and nothing, because whatever you're looking at is mind. It is not a separate thing, but it is visible, infinitely visible. We do not know that, and we cannot know that, but mind does. Okay, we'll finish up there. Question. Yeah, Harry, go ahead.
Just a comment about striving for right view. So I think it's and getting out of the dream, that can be a little abstract, but I think it's also good to recognize that when you don't do it, that you're causing harm to yourself and others. It's not just you pick the wrong bus. It's, I think it's more serious than that.
Continue.
Yeah, I mean, it's the idea of seeing everything as mine and getting outside of the dream. I mean, that's obviously right view. We can't argue with that. I'm talking about myself in order to really push myself in that direction. I have to see that what are the consequences of not doing it? And I think the consequences of not doing it are remaining in samsara and suffering and causing harm to myself and to others. I think it's something to keep in mind. It's just my observation.
Imagine that you could do that without thinking of that. That's mine. That's the difference. One is practicing from the idea of samsara, and the other one is practicing from the idea of mind. And mind will naturally, via it mind, and its primordial gnosis, determine from the Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi the proper course of conduct through body, speech, and mind, without thinking about that, what I'm going to do is harm someone, so I have to mind this paramita. The paramitas appear naturally in accordance with causes and conditions. And so we see that in a different way rather than saying, Harry saved the world. It is more that this is the function of mind. And that makes it a little different. So there is a subtle shift there. I hear you, but I'm positing to you, what if you just mind? Wouldn't those things happen naturally? It's not like you're saying, oh, if I'm gonna pay attention to mind, I don't pay attention to sentient beings. No, it isn't that way. We don't eschew sentient beings for the sake of nirvana. What we do is we are here, the mind is in samsara, and it uses this perfect Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi in order to comport the appearance behavior of body, speech, and mind to something that's constructive to all sentient beings. And then it will not go wrong. It will not tell a lie. It will not be greedy. It won't eat the last donut in the box, no matter how hard it is to do that. It will comport to the vow of saving sentient beings.
I agree. I just think we have a very strong capacity to fool ourselves and to think we're doing exactly what you just said when we're following another agenda and not recognizing.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's difficult because it's kind of like you can't see the forest for the trees. But the thing is that the established method has already been established to establish habitual patterns. Mm-hmm. And that is the danger of that. And you're saying, well, you're fooling yourselves, and who is fooling who? And so it really comes back down. But if you practice in the right way, the paramitas are self-evident. They're there just simply because the mind is settled. And that's what's important, is that as we begin to turn the mind's eye inward and work from it's ours to lose, rather than that this person wants to gain this, it works much, much better. It's impeccable in that way. Whereas if we work at it from the idea of the sentient beings are going to save the sentient beings, we use the sentient being vehicle and corporal body to do that, but we do not become attached to the corporal body or the fact that there is sentient beings to be saved. So it's interesting. That's the part that's a little bit of a twist there in all of that. But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it. I mean, because it's good to have these these views like that, but it's very, very subtle. You know, if you can turn that corner, you know, it's going to be literally self-evident, the self-nature of mind. Okay, so thanks for the question. All right, David.
Thank you, Gilbert. I wanted to ask, is it possible to contemplate while using the method of counting the breath?
Of course, because all you're doing is you're just doing a repetitive function that has no thought connected to it. As you're watching the breath, it's just a repetitiveness. As I'd mentioned before, Shifu used to equate it to a bullfrog sitting on a lily pad. And if the lily pad is the observance or the method, the bullfrog covers it completely. And he's not moving from one lily pad to another. So it just simply stays in one spot. So you just use the wall gazing, and you are looking at watching the breath, okay, understanding that that is an appearance, but there's nothing else that should be in mind other than your method. So you can use it.
So that would be better than just counting the breath, counting the numbers of the breath, just to watch the breath.
You can count it or watch the breath. It doesn't matter, whichever one works, which keeps you from having thoughts arising in the mind that you're going to bite at. You know, you don't care if the thoughts arise in the mind and they come and go and come and go. It's the ones that look like scrumptious morsels of something for you to snap at, like a fish, you know, looking at a piece of cheese stuck on a hook, you know, and thinking that that's really appetizing, and then you're gone. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Lewis.
Thank you, Gilbert. When I did my first 3-day retreat, I still remember how much pain I was in from sitting. And I used to sit before, but then as I did more retreats, sometimes I would be sitting and I would still be experiencing pain. And then I know this happens with other people as well. Suddenly, for 2 or 3 periods, there's no pain and thoughts don't arise. Is that because I stumbled into the proper way to meditate from a place where at first my ego was more pushing the meditation? Like stages in meditation, or such a thing?
Yeah, again, I kind of, as you know, I don't like talking about stages of meditation, just simply because then people go, what stage are you on? You know, and you can go from stage 1 to a realization, a snap of the fingers. But what's happening to you is just normal. I mean, you haven't done this. You don't, you know, you haven't lived life of having your legs crossed. So when you cross your legs, they're going to hurt. That's natural. So after a while, then you begin to put that down and have the idea that you don't have those kinds of sensations that are negative. You realize the sensation is there, that there might be leg discomfort, but you don't blow it up into this big banshee that is chasing you. You know, you just leave it alone. And little by little, through the maturation of your efforts, then you will overcome the idea of body pain, drowsiness, you know, and scattered mind, and you'll go past those. And so that just comes with learning. So you're doing fine. It's just that your practice in terms of study is so far beyond your ability to sit at this point you're kind of waiting for it to catch up, but it will catch up. Okay. So don't worry about that. You're fine and you're on your way, and you're picking up the practice as it goes along, and eventually all of that's going to be money in the bank for you. So don't be a self-flagellant. Okay. You're fine.
Thank you, Gilbert.
All right. Wei Shan.
Gilbert, today you used the word, I think when you say the mind, I don't know how, totally settled. Multiple times you use the word absorbed. Everything is absorbed by the mind. To me, the word absorbed means opposite of appearance. That means at that point, when everything is absorbed, that means there's all the appearances will be gone. That's the mind?
It isn't so much that we throw the baby out with the bathwater. It is that we don't have an attachment to whatever is appearing. So when I say that it is absorbed in the mind, it is just simply returned to mind, and it is seen as an appearance within mind. It isn't that the mind becomes dull or dark and that there's nothing there to see. It is just simply that whatever is appearing belongs to mind. So it is absorbed to mind. It returns to mind. And as a result of it, there is no idea of subject object or a viewer or anything, no duality. Everything is just seen complete as it is. And so it's difficult to describe that kind of a sensation because it's not a sensation. It is mind just simply stabilizing and becoming silent. But it's good for you to kind of question these things and kind of take a look at it so that you don't, start fixating on another, let's say, concept of what this should be. The absorption of it is just simply that mind knows that it belongs to mind and why it is appearing. So it's absorbed in the present moment. The present moment is infinite. And so we don't attach spatially or temporally to anything. It's very amazing. I mean, really amazing in terms of that and how one can use this in a proper way to course through life. No, it makes all the difference in the world because you're using what you originally have, which is this primordial mind. And this is the mind that is Virachana. No, the Buddha Virachana. You don't walk around and say, "Well, who are you now?" I'm Virachana. You don't do that, but you just understand that it is this mind, this pure mind that you're using. Not bad. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else? Michael.
This one phrase about turning the luminosity of the mind towards the mind's source. So it's like when directly, like everything locks in, it's as a right view is established, but as long as it isn't, stuff is moving. So I wonder so it's a bit like reminiscent of this phrase, the Buddhas use the vexations of the sentient beings to practice. So in order to tune it into the right direction where it locks in. But I wonder what this rotation is. Is this like adjustment towards right view? What is happening there?
If you recall when we talked about Ru Zi and Ru Jing, one the knowing mind, and one is we could call the Dharmakaya. And they are not two things. They're not this and this. They're like this, with little arrows pointing out in all directions, indicating it's infinite. But it is the mysterious aspect of the mind, we could call the esoteric, that mind knows its body. So let's say if my body represented the entirety of mind, I would know that if I have an itch here, or if I scratched it, it might go away. If I scratched it too hard, it would develop into a deeper itch. It has this ability to know all the things that are happening within the body instantaneously. And in that moment, it's timeless. And so when we see that, that's how mind functions. It's very mysterious because we cannot replicate that in samsara. We can only use analogies. And unfortunately, the analogies, as I was talking about last week, can only go to three-dimensional. They cannot transcend that into even what the quantum physicists say, that there may be 11 dimensions. It's beyond that. And so because it's inconceivable, that's something you should posit to your quantum physics compatriots there. I think that it'd be interesting, because then they can't go beyond the conception. And so this is beyond conception. It is, but it's like the body knowing anything that's happening within it instantaneously. It doesn't have to wait and get a phone call or whatever. It is instantaneously knowing that, because it is part of the body, the Dharmakaya. And so this Wu Jing is this gnosis, this primordial gnosis. That's what they were talking about. And that's why I kind of emphasize that today, is because this is the gnosis that we all possess. We just don't know it, because we try to think that this is a possession. It's not really a possession as much as the nature of mind itself, the self nature of mind. And so that's about as far as we can get with it. It is a component of self nature of mind without the idea of duality. So once we begin to talk about it from this viewpoint, then we create a dual system of that, of subject and object, versus something knowing the body, knowing the body. Okay, so kind of contemplate that. I think that will kind of like jettison you from your body. Okay, Robert.
Thank you. Hi, Gilbert. Thank you for mentioning the word. Our mind is non-agitated. And I think a couple of years ago, you mentioned the word, you say something about anything that moves. And that is, those are not real, those are dreams, those are ignorance. And so as we meditate, it's so hard to express. Earlier you mentioned it's a state of mind, but it's not a state of mind. You just can't define it. And so it is like a original nature of that mind. We're not trying to be there, but from all this learning, we seem to know that the nature is, it just don't move. The original nature doesn't move. So once you know that, then you begin to know everything else move. Those are not mine. They are called not mine. And so am I piecing the puzzle together? In fact, piecing it together is not appropriate to say at all. It's just be there and just don't move.
The phenomena, that's why I was mentioning about Nagarjuna, because his non-comment is as telling as Villamakritti's non-comments. No, it is something that we don't create a duality by saying that what moves is not the fundamental aspect of mind. It is the phenomenal aspect of mind, but it has within it the noumenon, because it has to have that. That's what is the emptiness of all things. It has to appear somewhere. But if we attach to the things that are moving, we cannot transcend that, because that creates an idea of duality. It does belong to mind, but it belongs to mind in an appearance sake, which is impermanent. So there's no self there. And so the Dharma seals are self-evident in anything that moves. We cannot say it is not of mind because it's created by the mind, but we do not look for the answer within that which moves. The only thing that we can see in that which moves is that it is presenting pratika samapada, causes and conditions. We're clear about what is there, but we have to look to right view to see that everything is created by the mind, and it is not necessarily created by the phenomena in mind. The phenomena in mind is created by mind, and so when we cling to the idea of a phenomenal appearance and take it to be mind, then we miss it. So that's kind of what you're doing. What you need to do is just keep working on that. That's why I call Robert a parrot, because his way of doing it is taking what I say and playing with it and playing with it and playing with it, and every once in a while the pieces connect in really well for him. And other times he's just kind of playing with it like a Rubik's Cube, but it's okay. This is his way of entering, and we all have different ways of entering. That's the way that he looks at it and understands it. So I kiddingly call him a parrot because this is his method of doing the things, but it works for him. And he's gotten some pretty good realizations by this kind of a questioning and listening to it, and he just has to let go at some points of it, or peer beyond it and contemplate it, and he does that well. So you may see me kind of like slapping him like Will Smith to the whoever it was that he slapped, and he didn't even get a Academy Award for it, but it's not really intentional as much as it's just kind of correcting him and telling, look this way, or don't look at that, or whatever. So I'm always appreciative of him, and I'm always watching you to see what you're doing. And you guys in San Francisco haven't invited me for a long time. You have to tell Warren that. So I'm feeling hurt. I'm getting sick. So
Okay.
I'm gonna go to my bed, and you guys need to inquire about me. Tell him that I'm sick.
Okay, I'll tell you. I'll tell him I'll tell him Gilbert felt hurt.
Yeah. Any other questions? No? All right. Well, we'll finish up on time. I thank you all for coming, and I thank Santha for hosting this and being there. And as we go along on this, I'm hoping to bring in some guest lecturers as we go along to see how they're doing, and I will still be present for that, but I just want to give people a chance, like an open mic Monday. So we'll see what happens, literally. So, but we'll do that, but I just want to make sure that we keep a high level of training. That's what I'm really trying to emphasize here is a very high level of scholastic and doctrinal and practice. Those three have to always be present. Okay. Otherwise, it's just a scholastic lecture, or if it's a practice, you don't know what even you're practicing. And doctrinal, so you know who you are in terms of a Chan practitioner. So we'll see you next week. Thank you all.
Thank you, Gilbert.
Appreciate your
Thank you,
care.
Gilbert.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Gilbert. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Gilbert.
Take care.